Hello everyone, I'm Prasad Kurche, the host for the podcast Parallel Perspectives. Today we have an interesting guest who comes from a sector which involves the most in the growth of the economy, growth of the country. This is a real estate sector, and our guest is not only an author, he's also a part of statistics and research. He's also part of the entrepreneurship. He's owning this real estate firm, and he's also a TEDx speaker. So we have Dr. Advocate Harshul Savla. As I've introduced you, he holds 2 PhDs,
Absolutely.
chairman of statistics and research at CREDAI. Then, as I told you, we'll hear a lot more about his real estate journey. I welcome you,
Absolutely.
sir. How are you?
Pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
So, before even we start, I am really, getting really curious on the part how this journey started.
So, it was a very interesting journey which started when I was doing my BMS, which is Bachelor's of Management Studies. And at that point of time, this is 2009, when real estate sort of was at its boom, just as how, it is presently. And I was very kicked about getting into the sector, exploring, and I didn't even want to study further. My mom was extremely keen that you do a master's. Business is always there. It's a third generation setup. So she was like, you complete your studies, traditional mindset. So which is where I gave my entrance and got into the prestigious JBIMS college, Jamnalal Bajaj, where I did my MBA in finance. While I was doing my MBA, actually my perspectives changed quite a bit. It's like, your MBA is not only about the syllabus learning, but it's a lot about alumni learning, your peer learning, the perspective change. But my sector was pretty much in my mind was real estate, because that is where the background was. So I started doing research on real estate, and this started as early as my MBA days. And dissertation research is very integral part of the MBA program, and it was highly appreciated because that was also a sector which none of the MBAs actually were doing research. MBA are always excited about banking, FMCG,
Marketing,
and
sales.
consulting.
Yes, yes.
So they want to sell soaps and hair oil, or they want to sell some loans, or do consulting, fancy McKinsey jobs. But real estate sector, and I'm talking about 2010-12, was not really on the radar of any MBA. So which is why any research that came out was interesting for the batch, for the seniors, as well as for the faculty, and which got very well received. So that motivated me on my research path. After my MBA, I was very keen that I take up professional journey. So I joined a firm called as JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, which is an international property consulting. And there I got an opportunity to work as an EA to the CEO of JLL. And they say in MBA that there are certain jobs which you should do even if you get paid 1 rupee a year.
Yeah.
And the job of EA is one such job, because you get a 360-degree perspective about firm management. Also, you get to shadow the CEO, and you get to see, experience how decisions are made, how things. It's even better than a Harvard course, I would say. Real boardroom learning happens there. You get to analyze the whole business from a very different perspective, and that became a huge value add, because our real estate development practice was a family office, and I was working at JLL, which is the institutional side of business. So in a way, you could say that I got 2 decades for vision while working at JLL about how the sector will shape, or how the wind is blowing. So that came to my benefit. Had I joined the business directly, I think I would have missed a lot, because then I would have just looked to better the way things existing. I would
Correct.
not innovate or be disruptive. So, 2 year stint at JLL became a game changer. I remember when I was quitting JLL, I had a meeting with the chairman of JLL, Anuj Puri, uh, quite a legend. Anyone who's into real estate sector would know him. So I had a lunch meeting with him, and I, voiced out that I'm very keen to do a PhD.
Hmm.
Uh, well, initially he said, "You're too young." I was just out of MBA, 2 years into the job. I said I was extremely keen, because now that I'm going to take up entrepreneurial role, I think I would be able to manage time better. And I asked him for a topic that, because PhD, the issue is that it goes on for 5 years.
Correct.
So you have to pick a topic which stays relevant. And real estate is very much like fashion. So, every 3 years the trends keep changing. So right now it's luxury boom. Suddenly you will see affordable housing. Suddenly you will see mid income. So very fettered that, if I take up something which doesn't remain relevant when my thesis is submitted, it'll go for a toss. So he gave me a topic called as REITs, real estate investment trust. And at that point of time, the full form was all that I knew about REITs. But it was his conviction. He told me, pick this up, this will grow, and this will grow really large. So I think that was game changer for me when it came to my avocation, my hobby, which is, doing research on real estate, thinking about real estate besides business also. So at that point of time, it started with REITs. This was 2014, when in the parliament, REITs was first introduced by the NDA government. And then onwards, it's been, as they say, rest is history, because then I completed my thesis on REITs. It promoted me to write a book on REITs. It was India's first PhD thesis on REITs. So, it was quite exciting. The book got very well received, because everyone wanted to read about REITs. And my PhD thesis was awarded at the same time, around the same time when the first REIT of India got listed, the Embassy REIT. So there was a lot of euphoria which was already in the air about REITs. You didn't have a lot of subject matter experts. And there I was flashing my PhD and a book on REITs. So that got picked up crazily. And that really, motivated me to write more content on real estate. And if you observe, there was no credible Indian content on real estate. You used to read books from UK or US
Right.
if you wanted to learn real estate.
Yes.
So that is where that journey started. It resulted, I mean, as of today, we have about 19 titles that I've authored and co-authored on real estate. On the work front, that was a set platform. So that came to my advantage, where I was getting into a third generation setup. There was 35 years back of legacy. All the business associates were deep rooted. I mean, they had almost 20, 25 years experience with the group. So that was relatively easy. But yeah, what I brought on the table was how we could institutionalize our family business, how we can work with banks who have a larger appetite, how we can take up projects which will leave a larger impact, not only in terms of our visibility, but also in terms of, the skyline of Bombay. So, those thoughts, really came thanks to JLL, because that is where we used to interact. Developers used to be our clients, so we
Yes.
interacted with them. And then that journey flagged off. And, I really feel today, wherever I am, all these bits and pieces of puzzles have actually got together. And then CREDAI happened, of course, 6 years back. Again, thanks to my research background, where I got into CREDAI, and then it's been no looking back. I mean, in terms of the opportunities that CREDAI has thrown, and suddenly you don't think like a fish in a pond. Now there is an ocean in front of you. So, you're not thinking South Bombay, you're not thinking MMR, you're not thinking Maharashtra, you're thinking national. And over the years, now CREDAI started thinking global, because, very soon you would be surprised, but India could be the high-rise capital of Asia, and later on globally, the way things are moving. So it's very exciting time. And I think my journey, if I were to give you in a word, it's all about real estate, whether it's books, whether it's academics, whether it's the buildings, whether it's just around real estate. So real estate is something that I'm extremely passionate about and really keeps me driving.
You know, the reason why I got excited to work, I mean, to get this episode with you was more into, getting someone who is that qualified to speak on real estate. And as you rightly said, still I see, because I also, I run a business which is a part of real estate, and I see that still at many part of the countries it is very unorganized. The
Absolutely.
supply chain is unorganized, then the compliance is, and
Absolutely.
we can talk on the complete, the flow of the execution also. And then there is also a kind of perspective in a layman about the developers and the
Yeah.
builders, which is, which is somewhat hurting also, because now, because I've worked with them, I know the pain a real estate,
Absolutely.
developer or a company goes through to, bring up a project, the investment, the the capital that is involved into it. Now, interesting part, what I would like to tell the audience is, as Dr. Savla told us, he's not even I mean, apart from being two-time PhD holder, he's also an advocate. So you have a 360-degree angle. You did your MBA in finance, you have legal studies,
Absolutely.
then you have your statistics and research studies, plus you have done all the researches that is into real estate. So, whenever we say for a startup, you need one operations guy, one sales guy, one CA, and a lawyer. So you are a single person source for everything. I can close my eyes, and if I get an option to pick one thing that, open a startup, I'll just pick Mr. Dr. Savla today. So, do you get offers like this?
Yeah, so I actually am extremely excited about the startup space
Hmm.
overall because I think that's the right way any nation which moves from a journey of developing to developed grows. Because startup is nothing but new ideas, innovation. And a country which backs startups, which backs new ideas is bound to grow because that is where really the older companies get a push to innovate, to be disruptive. And you look at the automobile industry, we had a famous case study in MBA days that the only color that a car was available was black, the Model T of Ford. And look at where we are today. I mean, even look at a basic car like Creta, it has possibly all features that a Mercedes offers.
Yes.
So the game has upped. I mean, you look at the first Creta, which came, say, about 5, 6 years back, and you compare it with today, you won't be able to recognize, except the name,
The
there's
name.
a sea change. And I always look forward to the automobile industry. And there's so many similarities. In real estate, you work with about 250 industries to put together a project. In automobile, you work with 80 industries.
Yeah.
But the logic is pretty much similar where you put together all the parts. And the innovation that automobile industry has seen, even from the most basic entry segment car, I think there are features which are just taken for granted. I mean, they're almost there. So it's such a big change as compared to how the automobile industry was 15 years back.
Hmm.
And you look at the innovation. I mean, the Thar came in, and immediately the feedback came, and it was extremely successful, the three-door Thar. But still, within 2 or 3 years, you have a new Thar Rocks which has come in, with all the check boxes which were not there in Thar. So
Yes.
I mean that is the level of reception that automobile industry is throwing up. Real estate, I mean, you really touched upon a good point. It has legacy issues. So for most of the common men, a developer is typically a bald, pot-bellied guy, gold chain cladded, in hands with politicians, in hands with goons, and doing business. So I think that imagery, which even to a certain extent Bollywood has projected or media has projected, stays in the mind. That whole sea change, and I always use RERA as a metaphor. I say the era post RERA.
Hmm.
It's like the Samudra Manthan.
Hmm.
So how the whole change happened in the universe. So very similarly, how the era post RERA is where you have a new breed of developers who are professionals.
Correct.
So if you really deconstruct the development business, it's a mix of entrepreneurship and it's a mix of professionalism. So, and that is really now what gets reflected into the real estate development side that you see now. So real estate development, and you mentioned it very correctly, there is a huge legacy issue which the business has. When you think of a developer, most of the people, they think of some bald-headed, pot-bellied, gold chain cladded guy who would have goons on one hand, politicians on the other, partner with them and do a project. So that's the image which the media and Bollywood have constructed in the minds. Probably that's how the business also was.
And that too only from a perspective of small part of Mumbai.
Absolutely.
Bollywood was based in Mumbai, and that is
Mumbai. So
you cannot conceptualize it for complete India.
absolutely. So whenever there is a character in a movie or a OTT about a developer, this is how they typically try to project. But if you really see, and I use RERA as a metaphor, because RERA is really a point from where you can see the sea change has happened in the industry. It's a metaphor for professionalism that has crept in. Doing projects with financial closure, doing projects by delivering on time, thinking about the product and not thinking only about a house, but thinking about a home. So the difference is really you start thinking about the environment part of it, the sustainability part of it. You think intergenerational. So you're not thinking for the immediate sales, but you're thinking how the building will make an impact for the next 30 years. And which is where I see it's a mix of professionalism and entrepreneurship, which is essentially what a developer is. He's a professional when it comes to delivering a good product, and he's an entrepreneur when it comes to risk taking. And that is really the new breed. And if you look at my peers, if I look at them, they are all abroad educated, extremely suave, looking to make an impact in whatever they do daily. And this is a very visible change, which I'm sure it'll reach out to the common people in times to come. You see a lot of industrialists who've been coming to the sector. That itself is the testimony to the fact that how organized the sector is becoming. Otherwise, you won't see big brands or industrialists, stepping in if it was all that murky. So I strongly believe it's a very positive sign for the nation. And as you rightly said, real estate contributes into nation building. So
Yes.
ultimately, infrastructure and real estate are the foundations of any nation. And especially a populous one like us, we are number one in population. So you would need both these hand in hand if you really want to go from developing to developed.
Can you just tell me the figures? I mean, do you have any figures that what would be the requirement? Uh,
So I'll tell you, honestly, the issue is a mismatch that is happening. The products that are getting created are serving the upper middle class and they're serving the elite. The product on the affordable side is a mismatch. And I firmly believe that the political will behind creating affordable housing is only restricted to five-star conferences and electoral manifestos. It's not translating on ground. And I would tell you a simple exercise. Go to any developer. I mean, a lot of them are now listed either on the main board or the SME board. So all their books are quite transparent. I mean, you can deconstruct any developer's book. And I, for one, would tell you that they are very happy to make 20%, 25% margin on the entire turnover. So no developer is really making 50, 80%, right? Which means what? Which means that 75% of the top line is going towards cost.
Correct.
Construction doesn't cost much. I mean, go anywhere in India, construction would be 2,500, 3,000 if you're doing a low-rise project. If you're doing a high-rise project, could go higher by another 30, 40%. So what is this gap where you have 75% of the sales going towards cost, but construction being a very minuscule part of it? That entire piece is gulped by the government in the name of premiums, GST, stamp duty. I mean, they are the biggest partners.
Yeah.
So the dichotomy is you have the government saying that we expect developers to create affordable homes, but at the same time, if you look at the cost structure that the government makes on a real estate project, so you charged with a stamp duty when you buy the land,
Correct.
or if you do a development agreement, you have to pay stamp duty and a GST. works out. Then you start constructing, your construction material will attract GST.
Yes.
Then you build, when you sell flats, again you attract GST. All the products that you use attract GST. There's no input tax credit like other industries. So effective, and again, when you sell, the home buyer pays stamp duty. In between all of this, there are government development charges, premiums. Single window is just a concept we talk about. There are like 40 NOCs that you require,
Yes.
and the wait and the search goes on. There is environment, for which you need separate committees, the high-rise committee, expert committee, tree NOC. So this whole lot of a thing, contributes almost 40-45% of your project cost is towards government.
And then I'll also tell, because I'll sorry to interrupt you, because I've worked with them, this is a time taking process.
It kills the project. I mean,
Exactly.
today, the second biggest cost after government premiums is the interest, for which again the government is responsible, because we are the tech suppliers to the world. We are the
Correct.
think tank for the world, but sadly we still don't have a software which can auto approve projects. I mean, how difficult is that? We are talking of BIM, we are talking of four-dimensional. You have all these AutoCADs which you upload, and if they are compliant to what the rules are, then automatically the file should move forward. How can each approval vary or be discretionary? I mean, all of this put together makes housing unaffordable. And what I believe in terms of numbers, almost 50% of India's population cannot afford quality real estate. When I say quality real estate, it's not about just owning some square footage. It's about the standard of living that you propose. Just like you don't look at what is the average income, you actually look at the per capita income, because
Correct.
per capita is the true indicator, because you can have a lot of trillionaires and billionaires and millionaires.
That's just 3%.
Exactly, and who could take up the average up. But if the per capita is really the right figure, because that really divides by the entire population, and you come to know, and that, if you compare, do that study with prices in tier 1 cities, like say the 8 tier 1 cities, how many can afford? I don't think so. Second, how much percentage of my salary is going towards rent? Globally, the average is about 30% to 25%. Typically, if you're in Mumbai, 50-55% could go in
Correct.
rent.
Correct.
And this in spite of the fact that the houses are available at 2 or 2.5% yield, while globally they go at 6% yield. So imagine if the house was going at 6% yield, he would need double his salary to pay for the rent.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that is how unaffordable, we've made real estate. And primarily, I again, reiterate, if you deconstruct the cost working of a project, you would come to know the guys who are preaching to make houses affordable are the ones who are the reason why the houses are unaffordable. And
Correct.
it's pretty much out there. It's right in the face, right? All the workings.
But so you've roughly talked about the biggest challenge of the real estate industry. So if I can break it down to the viewers also again, biggest disadvantage or biggest debacle is the capital incurred. I mean, what we call as a capex in the in our SMEs and our MSMEs or in companies, capex, the capital that is put in to get the executed product, that is huge. Timeline to get all the NOCs, documentation, plus if you are stuck somewhere, your project is delayed. So if your project is delayed, again you are covered under RERA. So RERA has huge terms and conditions again. Then comes your customers, because I have some customers who have, under RERA, have booked with the developers and the builders, and if at all they don't get their houses ready in timeline, then they sue them. So I would like to make the audience very clear that even I had a perception in my mind that simply the builders have skyrocketed the prices. But the thing is not this. The thing is the prices, as you said, 40% to 50% overhead is actually going on a cost which is non-value addition.
Absolutely.
And this 40% is causing the biggest of the gap for people who have this, I guess, Per capita income is a secondary thing. I'll also talk about people who are making 60,000, 50,000, or 1 lakh, even 1 lakh 50,000 a month.
Even they can't afford a tier
Even they
one
cannot
city.
afford a house
It's
in.
ironical because
Ironical.
I'll tell you the single biggest challenge, if you tell me, and real estate, I mean, I could do a book on the challenges we face as a developer, but the single biggest challenge is finance. And I just can't understand why government is not addressing this. I mean, if you want to set up a manufacturing plant, if you want to set up an industry, and real estate is a industry, it's the second largest employer. Today, you get at the interest rate of 7 to 8%, and that too is there are banks who queue up after you that take this up. Plus, you get interest rate subsidies because you are setting up a manufacturing plant. What is a real estate project? It is nothing but a manufacturing plant. Just that our locations keep changing with sites, but essentially we are creating a product over there. Now, every bank is given a sectoral limit about how much they can invest in real estate. So, firstly, that limit is so narrow that almost all banks are always overbooked. So, it's like that IPO which is oversubscribed 300 times. So, you
Correct.
have artificial valuations which are coming up, right? Now, worse, these banks can lend to something called as shadow banks, which are nothing but NBFCs. So non-banking financial companies. So instead of giving a loan to a developer at say 8%, they are lending to an NBFC at 7-8%. That NBFC further lends to a developer at 16%. So again, I believe the biggest creator of the bubble in real estate is the finance industry. Why can't you directly lend to the developer? You are lending to the NBFC. The NBFC is putting its own markup, effectively doubling the rate. Now, who's paying for all of this? The bill is ultimately being paid by the home buyer.
Right.
Because what does a developer do? He will say, okay, take all the costs that you want from me. I mean, every stakeholder can take a pound of flesh from the developer in terms of the project cost. Ultimately, he will put a 10, 15, 20% markup and he will price the product.
No businessman is going to die.
And ultimately, that is how any business works, any industry works, that you calculate your cost, you put a markup and you sell the product. So as a result, the inflated costs that you see of real estate, I would say are three factors. The premiums that you pay to the government, directly, indirectly, directly as in the government charges, indirectly through stamp duties, GSTs and all these pass-through mechanisms. Second, the delay that happens due to the approvals and hence the interest cost that gets built in. So the time value you get invested into the project so much that your interest cost becomes a
Correct.
significant item, right? And the third is access to finance. Now, access to cheaper capital has become such a huge challenge now that RERA insists that all your approvals need to be in place. So, as a developer, you need to have at least 50-60% of the project costs ready with you before you can even hit the market to sell. Now, equity by principle, first year MBA, is always more expensive than debt. So, how much load are you
Going to
putting
put.
on the eventual customer? And then you come out with subsidy schemes like I will waive a 50% stamp duty. 6% stamp duty, you're cutting it down to 3%. How is going to that make an impact? It's like saying I weigh 100 kgs, I want to go down to 70, but I'm going to diet for a day and I'm going to see that that makes a change. That's not going to address. So I think finance needs to be really looked at. Real estate should be looked as a make in India manufacturing initiative, and that would change the perspective. And all these NBFCs, AIFs, all put together, they're ballooning it up to a point where it's becoming unviable. And then you see stalled projects. So that's another outcome of all of this. So people who can't cope with these 3 points, then you see stalled projects. And India has one of the highest stalled projects in the world. I don't know any country who would have so many stalled projects.
You cannot expect that each and every developer or a builder might be financially literate or educated. He
I
might not be
mean,
even
you push
legally.
him to the wall to a point where it just becomes so unviable that he just can't complete it. So I think, and then now of course there is a whole thought process like Swami Fund and alternate funds and increase in FAR, which is now promoting all this cleanup of the legacy issues. But I think it's very important, if you want to correct it from a long-term perspective, make real estate really affordable for a common man, then I think government should relook at the cost structures that are levied on this industry. I think they are one of the highest in the world.
But you know, what do you see as a? I mean, government is a part. You understand that we are in a democratic country and reforms takes time. I'll tell you my experience doing little research on those container homes and sustainable homes. There are a lot of architects in Kerala, Goa, and Bangalore, even in Tamil Nadu that I've seen, are building sustainable houses. I understand that segment wise, if you say a segment of high rise luxury brand, that is one segment. But when you see towards the segment of individual homes or small houses, that is a 1 BHK or a 2 house, 1 or 2 BHK individual houses. Let us consider both of this, and because you have so much of research and content on this, what do you feel apart from government's involvement? What else can be initiated to make this affordable and sustainable? Affordability is one thing, but as you rightly said, most important is sustainable.
So I think, sustainability I see in two parts, right? One is sustainability in true spirit, which is really, I would give you a metaphor about difference between a skill and a degree. So a degree is a certification that you've completed X examination or X level, and hence you are awarded a degree. But it ends there, right? Ultimately, it's the skills which count, because skill will get you the livelihood. I mean, the degree will get you the first job, but your growth is determined by the skills.
Skills.
So, very similarly, if I were to look at the sustainability and ESG, as they call it nowadays, or green building certifications, I've done a book on that. I have two perspectives. One is when you do it in true spirit. So you're actually looking at rainwater harvesting. You're actually looking at small things like, the staircase to have motion lighting. So that I see a lot of buildings where they just burn electricity. I mean, don't require to. Every roof is potentially a energy creator. So if that roof space is not getting used as humidity, you could have solar built in. You could have as much greenery you could. It's always cooler, pleasant. If you look at the carbon footprint, the material choice that you do, the color palette that you do, etc. I mean, things like those could make it sustainable, could make it intergenerational. The open space that you leave, the floor to ceiling height that you give. I mean, I believe true sustainability is from that perspective, which augments your quality of life, which augments your standard of living. So real estate earlier was only about location, but I think now it's about the product. So earlier it meant if you stayed in a CBD, a central business district, that was most important. But now it's about staying in a good product, and which is where a lot of developers are putting their minds to. The second piece is the commercialization of green buildings or green certification. So it's like that degree. You go to a fancy university, pay lakhs of rupees, and you get that tag that you are an alumni from so and so. So it's very similar to that, where it's like, or I would give you a metaphor of brown bread sandwich or multigrain sandwich. I mean, no one knows the difference largely between white bread sandwich and a brown bread, but there's always a fat. Put butter, but brown bread is what I want. So that green building has also gone to that extreme, and there's a whole big industry where if my development cost was 100 rupees, only because now I'm doing a green building, it's become 130 rupees because I'm going to get a gold certification. So there's this commercialization of green buildings, which I feel is not going to help long term, because people read through that. So now, to a point where certification is becoming mandatory for commercial complexes, because you have MNCs who also want to look good on ESG, so they insist that. But I don't see a lot of residential developers going for green building certifications, purely because of the brown bread syndrome. So people do see into that. But what I truly believe is in the first part. You don't need to flash it that I'm a platinum rated or a gold rated, but if you do practices which are sustainable, and you could do a whole lot of them, right from your STPs to alternate power source, etc. So I mean, every little thing, if you are thoughtful about, I believe that could go a long way when it comes to sustainability. And that's the only way forward, because the way urbanization is happening, we're gonna, and I've done my Masters of Law in Environment Studies, so I'm extremely passionate about these things. Where ultimately you will, to a point, dry out the groundwater reserve. You will, and you already see water issues running in colonies and societies. I was reading an article that in Bangalore, people went to gyms to have a shower because there was no water
What I
coming in their house.
yeah,
I mean, this is actual news where, projects which were developed recently, and premium projects, are not having water.
massive projects.
So, that is something which I feel will go down everywhere. So ultimately, if you are tapping into, and I read a very interesting bit in Japan, something as basic as, after you using the WC, the water they wash the hands with goes into the flush tank directly. So they've designed the WC such that you wash hands and that automatically percolates into the water tank. For me, that is sustainability, I believe. Instead of that plaque that is put in the lobby which says platinum rated, I mean, that will not go a long way.
So can I feel so I get it on the green building part, on the sustainable part. You know, personally for me, because I'm staying in Goa, today if I want to purchase a house, it is all beyond 2 CR, 3 CR. Minimum, the place where we are in, this costs around 1 CR, 1.2.
Wow.
So what is the way? Because I see, like for example, I'll give you a general segment and you can, being an expert, you can just tell me. As we already told, that 3% top line are the billionaires. Below them are the upper middle class, and the lower middle class that are in the bracket of 1 lakh to 20 lakh per month.
Per month. Correct.
Correct? Now, for these guys, forget about the upper middle class because they can afford between 1 to 2 CR. The middle and lower middle class, that is the biggest segment. And then comes a 60-70% crowd that is all below the line. What is your thought on development of real estate for this all segmentation? I'm just going on the segmentation of the,
So I will tell you, honestly, a lot of clue about real estate development in the country happens from Mumbai. So, what happens in Mumbai first actually then goes down
all
to
the
different
parts
parts
of
of the country, especially when it comes to real estate. There's this huge strata of lower middle class and, the middle class, which has really benefited quite a bit due to redevelopment. So redevelopment is a very interesting tool in which the city of Bombay is developing, because Bombay is very pressed on landmass. You don't have a lot of area. So as a result of which, the only way to develop Mumbai is to redevelop, because it's already developed in a particular format. Redevelopment offers you larger homes. It offers you rent for your transit accommodation. It offers you a hardship allowance called as corpus. It gives you a new building with modern amenities, with lift, with parking, with ownership status, etc. So I believe the redevelopers are the ones who've truly elevated the standard of living of all the Mumbaikars, in fact. Redevelopments now started in Pune and also in Ahmedabad. So, very slow and steadily, I think redevelopment will happen across the nation. So, for example, if you are in Goa in this building, urbanization will catch in at some point. Someone will say, why can't a 20-story be made in Goa? And at that point of time, this 4-storied building is going to give way to a 20-storied building, which is where redevelopment will elevate the lifestyle of the existing residents. And how, like, really, I was doing some numbers about where is the wealth of an average Indian, and you'd be surprised, 50% net worth of an average Indian is in the real estate.
Yes.
So that is how expensive real estate is. And that is how valuable real estate is to an average Indian family. So redevelopment is that mechanism which will, give a solution. But if you ask me really where the true solution lies, it's with the government, because in a country, infrastructure and real estate is at the political will of the government. And I'll give you a simple example. Originally, the city of India was Kolkata. It was not
Correct.
Mumbai. It was
Correct.
not Delhi. All forms of progress was Kolkata, Calcutta in those days, where you had the trams and you had all kind of modern facilities
Amenities, yes.
available. There was culture, there was history, it was
First
flourishing.
port
The
also.
first port, I think, the highly favored city by the Britishers and the Indians. So Kolkata was really, the city to be in. It was not Mumbai. It was not Delhi. It was not Chennai, not Bangalore at
Yeah,
all.
at all.
So, those were not even cities one was discussing. And then you saw the whole shift. And if you look at Kolkata today, I mean, somewhere you get a feel that it's stuck in time. It's like Cuba. It's still 50 years back, right? I mean, of course, there's good work happening in Kolkata, but really from the potential where they came in from. And then you look at Mumbai, the way it grew. Of course, Mumbai was part of the larger Bombay constituency, which had Gujarat and Maharashtra combined. And then 65 is when Maharashtra came out, and then from there, Bombay really, went up. So if you really compare now how political will has changed the fortunes of a city which was nowhere close to Kolkata and now where it is. And now, if you look how the southern states, be it Telangana, be it Bangalore, Karnataka, the chief ministers over there run that state like a CEO of a company. So
Yeah.
they actually talk with ID companies that, we want you in. With ID company comes people, comes skilled labor, comes jobs, comes the spending power. Hence you have the malls, hence you have the townships, you have IT parks. So they bring that whole arena of growth. And today, whatever you see of Hyderabad or Bangalore, and they've done phenomenally. Some of the best developers of the country come from these parts. They are backed by IT boom. The IT boom is backed by the political will. So if you really see and observe how powerful the political will is, you see the history of Kolkata, you see the history of Mumbai, and now you see the history of Hyderabad, Bangalore. So that really gives you the answer that how powerful government is. And if government decides, I'll give you another example different from real estate. We'll talk about infrastructure. Today, as we talk, Mumbai is going through a $30 billion makeover. That is the number that the government of Maharashtra is putting in,
Yes.
is committed. So infrastructure worth 30 years is coming at one go. You have the metro, you have the bridges, you have the overpass, you have the undersea, you have the coastal roads, 14 lines of metro. We are talking of coastal road which connects Nariman Point to Virar. Already we have Marine Drive to Bandra, would be 90 minutes. Today it's 10 minutes. Real data, real time. So that's the entire Bombay is going for a make lift.
Till Alibag.
Exactly. So they are actually
From
ring
Virar
fencing
to Alibag.
the
I would
whole
say from
corridor.
Dahanu to Alibag.
Atal Setu, the longest bridge, right? So this is the political will. This is how they can make a difference. So it's the Dubai moment of Mumbai. How Dubai from a desert became this world-class city. I mean, practically today, it's the capital of the world
Yes.
when it comes
It
to
is the
opportunities.
capital for the businesses also.
Absolutely, everyone wants to be in Dubai.
I'm seeing a lot of businessmen shifting in Dubai.
Absolutely. So Mumbai, the way it is transforming, it is the Dubai moment. And why is it transforming? It's again the political will. These projects were not sketched today, they were sketched 40 years back.
Yes.
Sketched 30 years back. You go to the urban development department, the coastal road is a old conception. I mean, it's not something fresh. But how political will can make difference to Mumbai is something. And we have a chief minister who for almost a decade was the urban development minister, who also is an urban development minister. So then you see the translation into infrastructure, right? So I strongly believe if you have the political will, they can support you dually. One, in terms of your approvals, financing costs, etc. Second, in terms of infrastructure. And when you have these two combined, I mean, nothing is impossible. And today, if you go to China, the government was very focused around infrastructure and real estate. They built to a point that there are ghost cities. Every average Chinese owns 5 houses. I mean, there are buildings and cities where no one stays. That much house and infrastructure they've created. We are talking about a country which was once the most populous, but they have no dearth of housing. I mean, average Chinese, also it's a closed economy, so people can't put money outside. But today, an average Chinese owns 4 to 5 houses. So, if the government is at it, I don't think that's difficult. It's just that also we have a federal structure. So you have a central government which has its mind, you have the state government which has its mind, and then of
We
course
have got the
it
local
all
MNCs
works
also.
beautifully.
Wow. Yeah, I guess we have got the answer. It is moreover our political will, moreover
Absolutely,
the entrepreneurs who are working on the supply chain, and then the ease of documentation and the e-governance that can really help.
absolutely.
Now I come to the next point. We have talked about what is the pain point of the real estate industry, and we have really gone into depth. I mean, we can do a next podcast going into depth with the supply chain, but we have a shorter time. So, what is your insight for the next 5 or 10 years in the real estate?
I think it's the India moment. Real estate's fortune is dependent on the fortune of the economy. Real estate is nothing but the barometer of the economy. If the economy is doing well, real estate does well. If the economy is not doing well, real estate won't do well. Because for every growth that happens, whether it's your personal or professional, you need real estate.
Right.
If you're growing professionally, you need a larger office.
Okay.
If you're going personally, you will want a larger home.
Mm.
You would want warehouses, you would want data centers, you would want to invest into a REIT. Every growth is synonymous to real estate. So today we are at a very exciting time. I mean, I feel extremely excited when I see countries like UK, Europe, US, and the way the geopolitical scene is mapping up. I mean, we are in the safest bet today. We have the utmost political stability, which is very important for growth, because if you want foreign money to come in, they would want political stability. I think for last 15 years, we've experienced seamless political stability focused around national building. Today, India is a safe place. You don't hear of terrorist attacks. Don't, and by the way, we are threatened by neighbors on all sides. So we have a very hostile environment on all sides. Still, it's the safest, and it's very difficult when you have a population of 140 crores with diverse mindset to feel so safe. Today, no amount of news is deterring the stock market. I mean, there are attempts made by
By
all
yes,
stakeholders to provide all sorts of
inside the
news.
country and outside the country also.
Yeah, absolutely, but nothing's deterring the growth momentum. I mean, and that translates into real estate. Because if I'm a startup, if my company is getting bought out for 1,000 crores, if I have to pay 200 crores capital gain tax, I'm going to pump that money into some luxury real estate. I'm going to buy a villa in Goa. I'm going to buy a duplex in South Bombay. So that's where all these deals are coming. Today, 50 crore apartment is very normal when you go to South Bombay. I mean,
Correct.
no one is surprised.
Correct.
I mean, in fact, today a 100 crore apartment is not
I
surprising
guess
people.
now I've been working on projects wherein I've seen prices till 150 CR.
I mean, people talking 1 lakh rupee per square foot is so casual. So earlier it was very restricted to say a Malabar Hill or an Altamount Road. Today Worli is getting 1 lakh rupee a foot. Today Bandra is getting 1 lakh rupee a foot. Juhu is getting 1 lakh rupee a foot. So you see growth across. It was 50,000 rupee a foot in Dadar.
Mm.
Today Borivali is reaching 50,000 rupee a foot. So this is example of growth. This showcases all inclusiveness. And now what is happening on Mumbai is happening at the national scale. So for the first time, the growth is not centric only around tier 1 cities. the tier 2, the tier 3, the tier 4, everyone is experiencing growth. So there are malls coming up in Indore, there are malls and high rises coming up in Bhubaneswar, which is not even a tier 2 city. So you have all kind of cities which are actually seeing growth. You have spiritual tourism which is going up. Varanasi suddenly become a hotbed for real estate. So you're talking hospitality over there, you're talking villas over there, you're talking apartments, you're talking of hotels which will be 10x of what they are. What is this? This is nothing but real estate growth. We are talking of second homes so casually. Now, average upper middle class owns a second home. Today, that's the point it's reaching. Everyone wants to own a villa or a plotted development. You are seeing growth to tier 3, tier 4 cities of Maharashtra
Yeah.
because of plotted development.
Yes.
It's the first time since independence that we are witnessing an all-inclusive growth, which is not confined to 2 or 3 cities, not confined only to tier one. This growth is going across India, and that I believe will last longer because this growth is not fueled by a particular segment. You are seeing this growth all over. I mean, people today, even say in Ranchi, is making it bigger on the stocks, and he's really minting it out. And he's not very keen to go to a tier one city. He's investing in his own city. So that is the kind of opportunity, and which is why I get very excited about real estate overall. So real estate earlier meant only residential. It's not only residential. There is office space,
This
there is
commercial
malls,
place.
there's shops, there's high street, there's data center, there's logistic park, there's cold storages, there's senior living, there's student housing, co-living,
Hospitality.
co-working,
There's hospital.
hospitality,
Then there are
plotted
hospitals.
development, hospitals, villas, cinema. There are 20 types of real estate, and all of that is growing because the average Indian age is 28 years old. It's a young, aspiring population willing to make that spend. And when you have a population who wants to spend that kind of money, who also has that kind of money, so you have a generation which believes in YOLO, you only live once. So
Yes.
they are actually not saving. The savings at an all-time low when you, if you look at an average Indian household, but which also means that they are actually putting money into, and that really brings the growth, right?
Exactly.
So today, if Sony is selling thousands of TVs, they're gonna need larger office, they're gonna need a larger plant, they're gonna need,
This
so
is what is happening in India.
exactly. So the growth prospects, and the best part, it's all getting make in India. So people, this whole nationalist drive that has been set in, I think the positive is that everyone is taking pride in an Indian product. I think somewhere that was lost. You only believe that foreign goods meant quality, foreign goods was something that you should buy if you have money. But I won't be surprised if the next big luxury good comes from India.
Yeah.
So that is the way this is going.
Yeah. Great. Great to hear. I mean, what I understand the most is that Tier 1, Tier 2, and what I see is that we have to be the manufacturing hub.
Absolutely.
So, Make in India is very important.
Absolutely.
So we have covered our real estate part. There's an interesting part wherein Dr. Advocate Harshul Savla, he has, authored 19 books.
Abs-
You're a world record holder for that. I mean, first time I'm sitting with someone who is a world record holder. What was the journey and what insight can you share about that?
So, it was a very interesting one. I actually completed my PhD on REITs. And I got a lot of requests from people that, they want to read about REITs because the literature was not commonly available. And that was India's first PhD on the topic of REITs. REITs were freshly listed. The Embassy REIT had come out. Blackstone was further invested with Rahejas for the Mindspace REIT, and the Nexus REIT was getting built. So there was this lot of euphoria, and it is around that time that I converted my thesis into a book called as Fractional Ownership and REITs. And that became a rage. So that actually zoomed me to a national bestseller author cat. So it was almost for 6 weeks Amazon #1 bestseller. It got picked so much because that was, you could say, a truly Swadeshi book. It focused only on
Indian
Indian
market.
real estate. It focused only about Indian REITs. Of course, we had global case studies, but the focus was India. And that, I think, excited a lot of stakeholders. So you had developers, you had people from finance, investors, home buyers, everyone who wanted to understand this, and they started buying these copies. It was a not-for-profit venture for me. My idea was, I've done a PhD, I've been fortunate to get all the formal education, work in real estate. So the idea
You
was
have
to
done two
impart.
PhDs.
Yeah, and then I did my second one in law on RERA. So the idea was how I could impart or share this particular knowledge. So I'd opened this not-for-profit sort of initiative in the form of books, and that really motivated me to a point that I thought I would create more literature. But then time was an issue, and I think, fortunately or unfortunately, we had the pandemic, and that, I think, gave to a lot of us time to explore our hobbies. So that really was a moment where the author in me got the time. So I zoomed off to my farmhouse, and that is where I scripted 12 titles. So
Wow.
12 title worth of content, literature was ready during the pandemic. And I think it was the perfect setting, because one of its kind event in the world and one of its kind action that happened. So almost 12 rollouts that happened, and then I think that set the momentum. So now suddenly I had a whole rack of real estate content. So you could think of a subject on real estate and there was a book available on it, talking from India perspective in a layman language. Also, what made the books different is, by qualification, I hold my degree in research through a PhD. I hold masters in law and my bachelor's in law. So there was a legal perspective. I hold a master's and bachelor's in management as well. So this whole combination of research, law, management with practical experience as a developer, I think by far globally this would be the most unique combination available. And all of this got poured into the book. So, and I wanted to deliberately make it simple for a layman to understand.
Correct.
So I didn't want the books to be for the professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone knew the subject, the book was not for them. The book was for someone who wanted to know the subject. And real estate has a huge category. There are people who spent careers altogether only working in real estate sales, but they want to understand real estate finance.
Correct.
They want to understand real estate marketing, branding. They want to understand real estate green buildings. So for them, this literature was created. So the idea was that a layman or a student who aspires to be in this sector can do this. And then I was so happy to note that there are a lot of real estate founders who actually made my book as an orientation copy. So whoever joined them, they were giving them the book that, please read this, and you get going on this. So that sort of promoted, and that really brought me to spotlight, because now then I started going to a lot of forums to talk about the books I had authored. So everyone was keen for a book review or more thoughts on the subject, and that also gave me 19 topics I could talk about in public. A lot of those interactions happened. Again, thanks to the pandemic, you saw two things which got really picked up. One was the UPI, and second was the podcast. So now today UPI goes street to street, even tier 5 cities, and so is podcast, right? Podcast is all over. If you're not on podcast, you are not there, right? It was the Instagram moment of social media. So recorded content really picked up. It picked up for edtech, it picked up for knowledge share, it picked up from all perspectives. And I think again over there the books helped. So because people wanted to understand finer layers about a particular topic, and I spoke about them from the book perspective. So all put together, it was a self-fueling mechanism to a point. At this point, I have about 10,000 dedicated readers and I have this whole community where I, once a quarter or once in 6 months, I interact with them and I ask them, what is the next title that you guys want? So, it's really them feeding in the title, them feeding in what they want to read upon. And then, I sort of get going. So, because after a point you reach a plateau, what next now? So you've reached 19 books and then you think what next? So the next one's coming in 2 months, called the Redevelopment Guide.
Wow.
So it focuses only on redevelopment. And the one after that is called Real Estate Finance. So all the avenues which are available for financing a real estate project. So not just banks, not just NBFCs, you have the AIFs, you have the barter contracts, etc., etc. So all the sources of finance. So these are two titles. Again, this is something which the readers have told me that they want to read about redevelopment. They want to read about real estate finance. So that's how the whole thing has grown so well.
You know, we have actually gone beyond our stipulated time, and
Wow.
it's simply amazing that you have, I mean, so much of content you have in terms of what we can share to the audiences.
Absolutely.
I'm sure the audience can go and read book by Dr. Savla. Today we have a short time, but before going, there's an amazing thing that Mr. Savla is also a award winner for many Young Achiever of the Year awards.
Oh, yeah.
Then, how many degrees, sir?
So, in terms of young achievers, there are about 30 young achievers that have
And then
got,
you're in the academics.
and academically, there's 6 degrees. So, I've done my graduation in management, post graduation management, Ph.D. in management. I've done my graduation in law, post graduation in law, and a Ph.D. in law. And today, I'm very glad to share with all the listeners, I'm also a Ph.D. guide for management.
PhD,
So
yes.
there are research scholars who can do their PhD under me, and for me that was completing a circle. Right from someone who didn't want to do a post graduation, who wanted to join business after graduation, to a point that I'm a PhD guide. So that gives a lot of satisfaction. Also, there's a lot of misinformation about PhD. So it's a very mysterious element. I mean, when you talk
The
about
perception is created.
yeah, when you talk about PhD, people have all kind of thoughts. So I always make it an attempt to my students and to whosoever I interact who want to do a PhD to unravel that mystery around PhD, because it's not really so exquisite Amazon forest that no one's been able to plunder. I mean, it's pretty much methodological if you really think about it, which is a big passion of me. So I want to ensure that at least 100 research scholars do a PhD under me. So that's my next goal on the avocation front.
We are really grateful because you have created a 360-degree platform, research work, books for any entrepreneur who want to get into real estate. And plus, there are many coming up. I want to speak a lot. I have many questions. I'm sure we'll have another podcast for this.
100%.
To our audience also, we'll be very happy to see what else you want to know on the real estate from Dr. Savla. And definitely we'll bring one more podcast episode with Dr. Savla. Before going, what is your advice so today's advice will only keep for the real estate entrepreneurs?
I think for the entrepreneurs, I have only one advice. Look into the financial closure of the project before you start a project.
Most important.
Because that's becoming super critical nowadays. And second, think of creating a home and not a house. And when you think that you're creating a home, automatically your orientation towards the project will change.
Yeah.
You'll think of better floor to ceiling height. You'll think of better spaces for kitchen, for dry areas, for the bedrooms, for the living rooms. You will make it a habitable unit and not a matchbox. You will not think of it as a box price,
Yeah.
but you will think of a space which will elevate someone's quality of life and standard of living for generations to come. More often than not, people don't change more than 2 houses in their lifetime. You're contributing to that one house. So if I believe entrepreneurs think of it as a home, as a product to which someone is committing 30 years of their salary. An average mortgage goes on for 25 to 30 years. So it's a big responsibility where you are asking someone's 30 years of salary to be pledged into a product. So if that thought is at the back of your head, I think there are at least 100 things you would do differently than from what you are doing otherwise.
Great. Thank you so much
Thanks.
for your generous, share of knowledge.
Pleasure.
Thank you to all my audience. We'll have another episode with Dr. Savla. Please be available. Thank you so much.